Hello and welcome to The Rewind, where we dive into the making and legacy of various films from cult classics to award-winning masterpieces. Today's movie is The Hitcher, the 1986 horror thriller that stars Rutger Hauer as a murderous hitchhiker who stalks C. Thomas Howell's young murderers across the highways of West Texas. Directed by Robert Harmon and written by Eric Red, The Hitcher was released to divisive reviews, yet has gone on to become a beloved cult classic, praised by the likes of Christopher Nolan and Steven Soderbergh, with Rutger Hauer's chilling and intense performance, especially marked as one of the great villainous performances in film. And joining me today to talk about The Hitcher is filmmaker Peter John Ross, whose highly acclaimed documentary Social Media Monster is available online for people to watch. I really do recommend people do check out Social Media Monster and also all of other Peter's work as well. You got a video cast series out there as well. I've seen clips of that going around. Really good kind of insights into like the movie industry and such. So it's really great today to tap into the mind of everything Peter John Ross when it comes to Hitcher. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, no problem. Thanks.
The Hitch is a really interesting movie for me, Peter, because it's always been kind of like in the air, in the ether, growing up like in the 80s and such in a video VHS series. Like it was like one of those kind of ones you have to rent out. It wasn't a movie I watched though, like all the way through until maybe, I don't know, 5 years ago or so. Always saw bits and pieces of it, but I never had the time to kind of sit down and really invest in it. Then one night, I remember I was in a bit of a Rutger Hauer kick, and I was like, I haven't seen that one yet, and I watched it all together, and it kind of was one of those films that kind of like throws you back for a loop. As soon as it starts and Rutger's intensity kind of is like just ramped up to 11, is the way that he does it. It just grips you and really does really just draws you into this like cat and mouse game between these two like these antagonists and protagonists and all the things that come from it. And to this day, I think it's just a really kind of fine example of how even though a movie doesn't do well box office wise, even though a movie doesn't do well critic wise, give it time and people will come to appreciate what it is. And since then, like people like, Soderbergh and Christopher Nolan and so many other filmmakers and critics as well really love this film and for good reason. Do you remember the first time, Peter, that you came across The Hitcher?
Oh, absolutely. This was one of those things to where, I'm a teenager in the 80s. I'd moved in the States. I moved from Ohio in the forest to El Paso, where the movie takes place, but was not
Mm,
filmed at. And so it had that very American Southwest desert feel from start to finish. And as someone where I didn't grow up in that, seeing that was very impactful. And the way I saw it was on cable TV every 2 hours,
right.
either between HBO, Cinemax, Showtime, the movie channel. Back then, movies just had this near endless loop through cable TV, through the pay channels. And I'll never forget seeing it because I liked C. Thomas Howell. I was a big fan of The Outsiders.
Yep.
I was a really big fan of Red Dawn.
Yep.
And so, like, I really wanted to see this, and I love Blade Runner. Blade Runner is to this day my favorite film. So Rutger Hauer, and what struck me was it feels almost more like an art film
Mm,
because they don't actually explain a couple of the key things. Like they don't explain what his actual motive is. He's asked, and he goes, "Figure it out,"
mm.
and that's it. And you're left with that, and you're left to fill in the blanks in your head. And it was masterful. And it's like what when C. Thomas Howell changes his mind towards the end, he never says why. It's not explained. And I kind of normally I have an allergic reaction to that, but in this case, the movie plays out like an actual nightmare. Do you know what I mean by that? Like it just
Well,
it's
there's
like
a kind of
endless.
surreal nature to it, and that ambiguity, kind of like, because you got to think about the 80s when it comes to these villains, like especially horror villains. There's always a backstory. Jason Voorhees is because of what he is. Freddy is because of what he is. There's something always there. There's a lore there. But Eric Red and Robert Harmon, they had no interest in delving into lore here. This is more about the villain as a force, as a more than kind of like a kind of like a person with individual kind of desires or anything. He's just a force. He's a I think Rutger Hauer said that later on that people kind of misunderstood the character because he kind of saw him as just like this presentation of evil just in physical form, and that's all it was. And I
Yeah.
think it was really cool, but really kind of ballsy at the same time to try to pull something off during that time in filmmaking.
Yeah, a lot of people, myself included, generally, I need the answer. I need to know and I need to understand why. And in that movie, I just accepted it. Because to me, it really taps into there's this theory that one of my idols, Walter Murch, an Oscar winning editor, he was friends with George Lucas. He wrote THX 1138, the short film and the
Mm,
feature.
mm,
Walter Murch always compared filmmaking to our dreams. And in particular, this really hits on this notion of a nightmare. Like modern horror started in actuality with a non horror film called Westworld, where there's this unstoppable force that just keeps coming. In the case of that movie, it was Yul Brynner as a robot cowboy. Then that was kind of transferred to horror with Michael Myers and Halloween. And as you said, Freddy and Jason each. It's this existential nightmare of something is coming for you and it doesn't stop, like in a nightmare. And this whole movie feels like that inescapable nightmare. Like no matter what happens, it's still coming. It's still coming. And the whole movie gives you this feeling of dread from the score to the look, the feel, everything about it is, it just, it's relentless. And that's what to me always stood out about the movie. I've never seen the remake. Have you seen the remake with Sean Bean?
No, like I like Sean Bean, but I know they made a sequel as well. It had Gary Busey's son, Jake Busey, and I see Thomas Howell comes back for that as well. I think they made that in the 90s. And
There's
remakes,
no point.
it was around the time where like everything was being remade, all horror movies, Texas Chainsaw and stuff and everything. And it's just you kind of get to the point where you're kind of just over it. And like I always say, like one of my philosophies when it comes to sometime watching movies that like borrow heavily or a remake of a movie is like, why do I need to listen to the band that rehashes Black Sabbath riffs when I can just listen to Black Sabbath, you know? I got the
Yeah.
original, and that's good enough for me. So no, the remake was never anything to really interest me whatsoever.
I had no interest in seeing it. I love Sean Bean, but there's nothing wrong with the original. It didn't need remade. Like it, I
No.
don't know what they would bring to it or change or add to it. It didn't make any sense to remake it. Yeah, the Hitcher to me, which I recently rewatched for this, was it was surreal looking at it now, being more purely analytical and less as like just average audience member. What struck me was there's also this that isolation that came from that part of the US, Western Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, into Nevada. It's pretty isolating out there in the middle of nowhere, especially on the highway.
Right.
And it's kind of like there's something also about that, about like I found even in the opening credits, he's C. Thomas Howell's falling asleep. And I'm like, I've been
Hmm.
traveling so much for work lately. It's like, boy, can I relate to that feeling right out of the gate. Like it really hooks you with that. And Rutger Hauer's performance, what makes it so eerie is he's got this charisma, but there's something always off about it. Like he was so good at playing something a little bit off while still being appealing.
Mm. Very true. You know, a lot of this comes back to the screenplay. So we got to talk about Eric Red. He's kind of like the pivotal guy who kind of launched this. It's his screenplay. He's a
Mm-hmm.
Pennsylvanian born screenwriter. So back when he was 20 years old, he made this short film called Gunmen Blues. It's the short film is like about an Asian hitman and a tough street punk who kind of clash in a New York bar. So again, that kind of like that kind of clash thing between an older kind of maniac and like a younger kind of like a character here. So no directing offers came from it. So he decided to move west. It was when he was in a 7 month stay in Austin, Texas. He wrote The Hitcher. He was really influenced by the Doors song, Riders of the Storm.
Yes, I
Specifically the
read that
line,
too.
"There's a killer on the road." So that's something that really kind of like appealed to him. So he wrote this screenplay, and then he sends it out to everyone he can, like you know, all kind of like producers, whatever you. He has a pitch that comes with it, like a little note at the front. It read like this: um, "It grabs you by the guts and does not let up, and it does not let go. When you read it, you will not sleep for a week. When the movie is made, the country will not sleep for a week." I mean, that's a pretty good kind of pitch to put in front of their screenplay. So this one guy a script development executive named David Bombick. He gets this, this kind of pitch kind of thing, and usually says no to these things, but he was kind of intrigued, and so he gets a script from Eric Red. So a script, usually like a standard script, is like it's like 1 page per minute kind of thing, right? So it's usually around
Yeah.
120 minutes maybe. This script was 190 pages. It's like big, a huge script.
And I think the
And
movie's only like an hour 40.
exactly. And so he reads it anyway, and he absolutely loves it. And they bring Eric Red in, and they start working on it. Um, there is some things in the script though that, and this is be a thread throughout trying to get this thing made, which is the violence. So people consider
Yep.
this movie to be violent, but the script itself was much more violent in his bloodshed. Even though Eric Red is consistently said it wasn't that bad, but everyone else outside of him says yeah, it was pretty bad. Like there was a you actually see the family being massacred in the station wagon.
Yep.
Instead of C. Thomas Howell eating almost eating a severed finger, it was an eyeball that was in a hamburger. You
Yeah, I
have, of
read that.
course, the Jennifer Jason Leigh being torn in half, but in this script you actually see this thing. You got the decapitations, people perishing from rifle blasts, slit throats, car crashes, explosions, the whole kind of kit and caboodle. It's like John Rambo's fantasy weekend, right? It was all in the script, so this was something they really worked on. But finally, Eric Red found someone to really kind of grab hold and do this stuff. I got to ask you though, like as you yourself, like you've worked in the industry for a long time, you've been a writer, director, and such. Those first initial steps to try to get into the industry. Did you remember trying what type of strategies you would try to develop in trying to get someone to read your stuff, or is it just a case of
Oh
just being
yeah.
persistent and tenacious?
I had a great trick, which was they back in the late '90s when I first started writing screenplays before I had any way of trying to direct anything, because at the time you needed at least 20, $30,000 to buy film stock, develop it, get it transferred, and do your edits. So being a director at the time, even with that new indie level of things, still felt out of reach. So my
Mm,
intent was to write a script, sell it for a realistic number like 50, 60,000, not the $1 million deal people fantasize. I'm looking at like, can I get 30 to 50? Can I get 30 to 50,000 and then I could live on half and make an indie film for half for a year? That was my goal. And so what I did was at the time, there used to be these books you could buy every 6 months called the Hollywood Creative Directory.
hmm
And it had the listing of the name, mailing address, phone number, fax number, and email addresses of everybody at every production company in Hollywood. And so what I would do is I would get a subscription to the Daily Variety, and they would have these sections of, oh, so and so was at, you know, on Vine Street in Hollywood at this particular bar for the opening of, the after party for the opening of this film. And I would read these names, and at the time, again, the internet is still fairly new. So I had a fake email address that ended in .uk.2 or something like that. And so it looked like it was from England. And I used the name Steve Gadd, which is the name of the drummer from Journey. And it's a name that sounds familiar, but you can't place it.
hmm
So I would send emails to people going like, "Hey, Brian, it was great meeting you at the Sutton Bar. And like the other night after the screening, it was nice talking to you. You remember that kid in Ohio I was telling you about, Peter John Ross? He's got a great screenplay. You should request it."
mm
The next thing, and here's his email address. And I would get an email going, it's like, "Hey, I heard about your script. Can you send it to me?" And that was my way to get past the gatekeepers, was by lying and cheating. And it only worked to a point, which is I optioned, didn't sell any screenplays, but I optioned 3 screenplays. One of my options was to Steven Seagal.
mm.
I optioned a screenplay to him, and I blew my opportunity because in development calls, I was too young and too stupid to understand what they were trying to tell me. They were like, "You know how you have a focus on the whole team of characters? Focus on just the captain." I was like, "Well, my artistic integrity, it's about the team. That's the
Mm,
spirit." And they're like, "Okay, thanks." And then
mm,
I stopped hearing. 2 of those calls, and I refused to change the script. They were done with me and done with the script because I had something written about a team, and Steven Seagal did not have any interest in being on a team. He wanted
No,
a movie
he is the
about
team.
one
Yeah,
character. And I
yeah,
was too stupid to see it. And I was too dumb to realize it's like, you can have the greatest script in the world. It's worth nothing compared to a great script that gets ruined, but makes money for someone.
right.
So, like, they can ruin your script, but if it makes money, you can get a career. I didn't really understand it at the time. But going back to the screenwriter for this, Eric, the other thing is, if you read the actual screenplay, the description of Rutger Hauer's character, John, he was supposed to be at least 15 to 20 years older than he was, like mid 60s to late 60s, scrawny and just more creepy looking. I found it more interesting for him to be Rutger Hauer, tan, blonde hair, athletic. That made him more formidable to me, even
Blue
though
eyes.
it was, yeah, I thought it was a much better choice. But also, what you're talking about with how the script read with the showing the graphic stuff, I thought the directorial choice to imply the vast majority of violence worked and made it even creepier in the movie. Because if you see something like that, if you come across a dead body, you're not going to stare at it. You're going to look at it and turn your head because it's too hard to look at.
Yeah.
And so the way they minimized it made it strangely more visceral to me.
You let your imagination run wild and in such very kind of well, I know the director Robert Harmon, who I'll talk about next. He kind of often evoked kind of Hitchcock in a lot of ways. Like he wanted to approach the violence in this movie. So he's an interesting guy as well because he was a still photographer turned cameraman. He had this featurette called China Lake, and interestingly, the plot of that film was it was a about an LA cop on vacation in a high Sierra desert who gets his kicks from stalking unsuspecting motorists on deserted roads and then running them down with his cycle or locking them in their trucks and leaving them to perish in the desert heat. So, considering a featurette like that works so well to something like The Hitcher, right? And so he signs
Yeah.
on to do the film. They're ready to go. They got the script. They're working on the scripts, toning down the violence and everything else. Now trying to find a distributor is a very, very hard task because again, it always comes back to the violence. So Universal Pictures passed, Paramount, Warner Brothers, Columbia, Orion, New World, all of them said nothing. They had a little bit of a little bit of a waltz with Fox, but then the first that didn't work. They went back to Fox again, didn't work again. At the end, and this is the reason why you saw it on HBO, like HBO/ Silver Screen decided to take on the distribution for this thing, and because of that, HBO Silver Screen have a contractual contract with TriStar Pictures to release stuff theatrically,
Yep.
and that's how it gets in the theaters as well. So we got finally got our distributor and everything else. Now we need to find our cast. So we mentioned about Rutger Hauer, and you're absolutely right in regards to the original depiction of what the character was supposed to be. So the people they were looking at were people like David Bowie, Sting,
Yep.
Sam Shepard, Harry Dean Stanton. Terrence Stamp was especially the director wanted Terrence Stamp. Harmon was like, I want to get him, and he will actually be like, he will actually use Terrence Stamp's picture during pitch meetings, like about like this is what we're looking for as the guy. But Terrence Stamp said he refused the role. He said that he worked very hard to get into his roles and to get into the mind of that madman would completely be destructive to his entire personality, he said. Years later, he actually showed regret in regards to not taking on the role. So he passes. Then you got Sam Elliott. Sam Elliott was
Yes.
very, very close to actually doing this.
Well, he was
Apparently,
cast. He
well,
was,
yeah.
that's the thing, is Sam Elliott was cast in the role, and then a scheduling conflict came up.
So what
And
I read,
they said
yeah,
he was shockingly scary. And I'm having
yes.
a hard time picturing Sam Elliott as scary, but I think he's got the acting chops to pull it off.
The Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you'll love. So there was in 2011, Eric Red did a questionnaire at the Silent Movie Theater, and he said that the audition itself was so terrifying that the movie producers refused to stay inside the casting office whenever Elliot was around. But again, it came back to, all that kind of stuff. Plus agreement couldn't be reached on salary. So a lot of these things. So finally, you get Rutger Hauer. So at this point, Rutger Hauer is becoming a name in Hollywood. So he did his stuff back in the Holland, like Soldier of Orange and stuff like that.
Yep.
Blade Runner, Lady Hawk, Nighthawks, all these great movies he's done. And so what they thought was like kind of like yourself was like it was really interesting how he was someone who was incredibly kind of attractive and alluring, but there's a danger to him. I kind of describe his character in this movie, in others as well, kind of like very alien. There's that alien sensibility to him because he wasn't like kind of like Hollywood leading men, and the way he kind of approached his role is very different too. So Rutger Hauer said that he had a short visit with the people, read the script, and he said that the script really got a hold of me. He said he wasn't looking for work. He was looking for work in other areas. He didn't want to be a villain again. But then he said he read it and he said, if I'm going to do one more villain, he's going to do this one, and he couldn't refuse it. So that's how they get him on there. Rutger Hauer, when you think of him overall, I actually did a rewind on a movie called Blind Fury last year.
Yes.
The one where
Well,
he
he's so
like
charming.
incredibly
He's
in
so charming
comedy,
in Blind Fury.
and we are
That's
talking
another one
about
that
yeah.
it didn't do great at the box office, but again, home video. And that's another context to add for, people under 30 that they won't understand, which was back in the 80s, a film could be enormously successful after bombing at the box office because you had so many opportunities for it to make money. First, you had, VHS rentals, which is before you could buy a VHS, you would rent it. And then a few months after that, you could buy it cheap at the same time that it's hitting the pay channels. And then a year later, it's on the cable channels with commercials. So there were like a million opportunities to catch movies that just don't exist today because of streaming. They have just these channels with this limited number of movies. You could have a movie you love and it's not streaming right now. Like, I don't even know if The Hitcher is something you could find on streaming right now.
It's really interesting as well because when it came to Rutger, he was kind of like when it came to that VHS era, he was one of those guys where his titles, people knew of his films through that way more than through the cinema. And I think
Yep.
that influenced such a generation of film fans and filmmakers as well. Because even though you might think, oh, his stuff's on VHS, it must be of some type of, I don't know, camp quality or not so good. The movies were
Yeah.
actually quite good and the performances were always great. And what was really interesting about him as well is that he can do so many different things. People tend to think of him as a villain, but he's got quite a range to him. Even a movie like Split Second, or like that film was like absolutely fantastic. I love that film. I'm not sure though who is the Rutger Hauer of today. I was debating with the person I was talking to before. Maybe Michael Shannon could be someone who was kind of similar in that way, where he could play intense performances and do different genres. Can you think of anyone today that's kind of like that Rutger Hauer kind of the mode? Because it's really hard to kind of think of someone who kind of
I
fits that kind
can't,
of
I
thing.
mean, we have so few actors. I mean, Pedro Pascal, he's playing everything. Why not have him play villain too?
Hmm.
No, I mean, what's funny is though, I feel like I don't know of anybody that fits that exact mold, but I know like an actor that's fantastic that recently got, shat upon by Quentin Tarantino is Paul Dano.
Hmm.
But it's not that same as Rutger Hauer, but he's somebody that he's got that intensity and a charisma to that odd character actor vibe that he can put out.
Hmm.
And that's the thing about Rutger Hauer. Rutger Hauer always managed to put a unique kind of odd spin. Like even in Blind Justice, where he's playing the hero, and he's very kind of charismatic and sensitive as because there's it's about him protecting a kid, if I remember correctly. And so he
Yep.
was very fatherly to the kid. So it's like, and he pulled it off very believably for a guy who's known for playing villains. Rutger was so perfect in this warm fatherly character. And then him as the leading character in Lady Hawk with
Yes.
Michelle Pfeiffer and Matthew Broderick, I thought, again, as the good guy, I thought he was really appealing. he just had that thing about him. And he did his autobiography that was fantastic. If you've never read it, it's really good.
The other star in there, C. Thomas Howell, you just mentioned him before. Outsiders is a big thing. I just finished reading The Outsiders to my son, so we're planning to watch the movie this weekend. So we're really looking forward to that. And he told me, who's playing Ponyboy? I go, it's this actor C. Thomas Howell. You watch it, he's just like him, and like for this role of Halsey, there was a couple of people mentioned by the producers, Matthew Modine, Tom Cruise, Emilio Estevez, a lot of that kind of pack of actors around the time, a lot of the Outsiders guys.
Yeah.
But when they agreed on C. Thomas Howell, they all agreed that he had the perfect look. He was kind of trepidatious at first, because said he was kind of choosy with the roles he was trying to do, which you can understand because he was kind of like an actor on the rise. He just did Outsiders, Red Dawn. I mean, that's a great 1-2 combination right there. And so when he heard it was a thriller, wasn't something he was interested in. But then he was kind of like pressed to really read the screenplay, and then he said he couldn't put it down. And he said, I couldn't believe the things that happened to my character in the first 12 pages. And then
Yeah.
he just wrote it. And he also wanted to work with Rutger. That was a big thing, appeal to a lot of the actors here, Rutger. I find it funny that I think the first line that the character has of Halsey in the movie, when he picks up the hitchhiker, is "My mother told me never to do this." And you think to yourself, you should have
Yep.
listened to your mother, which I think was quite a good opening line, I think.
Oh, it's so perfect. And the other thing, it's funny you mentioned Matthew Modine. I just got to meet and interview him a few months ago.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Oh my God, he is such a nice guy. Like, just most people today know him from Stranger Things, playing Papa and a more
Mm,
nefarious character. But I always knew him from the '80s, like from Vision Quest and all that. So and Full Metal Jacket. So I
of
always
course.
remembered him as the sweet, nice guy. And that's closer to what he's really like, just way more intellectual than he was as those '80s characters. And I could totally see him in The Hitcher too.
Mm,
From in the '80s when he was doing those more, pure innocent guys, he would have been perfect in that too. But see, Thomas Howell, you mentioned The Outsiders. The interesting thing is, I always remember that movie. It was barely a 90-minute or an hour 40-minute movie itself, and it was another one that was so ingrained. And you look at that cast, you had C. Thomas Howell, Ralph
yes.
Macchio,
Hmm.
Matt Dillon, Patrick
Yep.
Swayze, Emilio Estevez, Tom
Tom
Cruise, and
Cruise
Rob Lowe, and
and
Diane
Dan
Lane.
Lane. That's right. Yep.
Diane Lane, who I think
Hmm.
was 15 or 16 when they shot it.
Yeah.
And it's like, and she and Matt Dillon did not get along. He was so mean to her. But that is a power of like Tom Cruise barely in it. He's like a second, third string character in it, and he was so good even at that.
Hmm.
And I think Leif Garrett is in it too.
That's right.
Leif Garrett, the singer, does a fantastic acting job in the movie. And so yeah, it's such a stand, and the lead is C. Thomas Howell. He's the
Yep.
lead of that movie, and he holds it so well. So you just expect him to be a superstar, and he kind of was for a time. And he's having a bit of a second renaissance lately. Like he did a season of Bosch,
Hmm.
and he's done a few other things with his gray hair and his gray beard. He's taking on riskier roles and doing a lot of really good, deep acting in the last 5 to 10 years. So it's really good to see him coming back around and getting a lot more roles again.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Early this year, late last year, Francis Ford Coppola got the American Film Institute like Lifetime Achievement Award. It's something they record and put on there. And for the outsiders, out comes Ralph Macchio and C. Thomas Howell. So C. Thomas Howell comes out looking like a grizzled cowboy because he's actually from Oklahoma, which a lot of people don't know. He's actually he lived on a ranch, and he's like a ranch hand and stuff like that. And he comes out with a big gray beard and the gray hair, and then comes Ralph Macchio. Ralph Macchio still looks like he's 16, which is quite
Yeah.
so it's quite funny seeing like both of them stand next to each other. But it's like again, Ralph Macchio is I think is a similar kind of vein of actor to him, and he played Johnny Boy, where that they both of these guys had like their moment in the 80s, and then the 90s kind of just got away from them, but they've come back now to very
Yeah.
in well not
Well,
as indifferent because Ralph Macchio is kind of replicating something he did from the past, but C. Thomas Howell has become a really great character actor. He really has.
yes. That's where he's showing up, guest starring on TV series, usually in something more dramatic, more serious roles, and really differentiating him from what he was known for in the 80s.
Hmm.
Ralph Macchio, though, it really does feel like he really let the acting side of things get away from him. Because you watch him in the first season of Cobra Kai versus the later seasons,
Hmm.
he clearly kind of reacclimated himself to the acting, because the first season is kind of rough watching him perform that role he played. And because he seemed almost like he'd retired from acting.
Hmm.
And he did this as kind of a lark. And then once he got into it, he's like, I got to take my craft seriously. And he sharpened up quite a bit again. And he got really good for the rest of the run of that show. And that's such an interesting thing to take, because one of the things the 80s cinema is known for is, you know, things, thanks to, you know, after the 1960s, everybody got into these gray areas. The morals are always gray. Characters are always good and bad. It's anti-heroes. But then Star Wars set the 80s off in a black and white, good guys versus bad guys feel. And motivations kind of went away in a way, in terms of like the Karate Kid. The bad guy, why is he a dick?
Hmm.
Just because.
Yeah.
Why are his group of friends in Cobra Kai dicks? Even lesser, they're his friends and he's a dick. So they didn't have to have a reason. You didn't have to know about what happened to them to make them that way. You just accepted it. When you do a show like Cobra Kai, they actually, in the modern era, they're like, well, we need to understand why they're like that. And so they get into the motivations. They have flashbacks to him as a little kid and what kind of verbal abuse he was dealing with, that he had to output his rage at someone else since he became a bully. And it's fascinating to see how they U-turn those things in today's world when they either do sequels or adaptations of stuff from the 80s. We actually have to know a reason why now. And that's why the Hitcher, keep bringing it back to that. It's like, we never know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's that iconic scene to me that I don't know if it's iconic to anybody else, but when they're in that diner,
Mm-hmm.
and it's this incredible tension about there's no bullets in the gun, and he doesn't know, and we, the audience, don't know. And when the scene ends, he's asking, why are you doing this to me? And he goes, figure it out. But when he's doing that, he's licking pennies and putting them on his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as a kid, I'm like, I don't get that. What is that? What is that? And you find out later that it's like, well, in the 1800s, from like cowboy times, to keep a dead person's eyes shut, you put coins over their eyelids to keep them shut.
Mm.
And I didn't know that at the time. And when I found it out from watching the movie and it being fascinated, I was like, what is that? What is that? And finding out like 2 or 3 years later why, the symbolism there of essentially like, you're either, is he saying you're dead, I'm going to kill you, or is he saying I've chosen you to kill me?
Mm.
And I love that it's never explicitly said. It's up to you to interpret what that means. And there's always the idea of, I think it's Charon from Greek mythology, the guardian of the ferryman.
Yeah.
And you had to give him coins. And that's one of the reasons they put coins on the eyes also. It wasn't just to keep them shut. It was also, you're giving money to Charon to make sure they don't go to hell.
Yeah.
And so it's like all of that, even the implication of a religious thing is like, is this real or is this purgatory?
Yeah.
You don't know fully because it's just so relentless. The only other movie I've watched that had that same level of relentless intensity was Mad Max Fury Road.
Right.
Like the moment that movie starts until the end, it never lets you loose. And that's how this movie felt. It's like you have these brief moments, but then they get ripped away from you. Like when he gets to the police station, he thinks he's safe. Everyone's dead. Gets to a hotel, Jennifer Jason Leigh is kidnapped. Yeah. You know, it's like every time you feel remotely safe, it's ripped away from you. And it's just, again, I always make that movie felt like the visual interpretation of an actual nightmare where you feel like a fever dream where you can't wake up and you can't get away from whatever's chasing you.
Yep. I want to talk
and
about...
that's why I think it resonates through the decades.
I want to talk about Jennifer Jason Leigh as well, because we talked about, this character being torn apart. She plays Nash. Jennifer Jason Leigh, I think one of the great like actresses of of any decade. Just fantastic. Always consistently working ever since, her time doing the Fast Times at Richmond High, and always just really brave performances throughout. No matter supporting lead, she's excellent in this movie. She actually worked with Rutger Hauer in a film called Flesh and Blood. It was kind of like him going back with Paul
Yes.
Verhoeven in 1985. And that's one of the reasons why she wanted to do the film. But she also said that she loved the character because she felt there was like a real person she thought was
Yes.
in there. And she, out of everyone who, were talking about the violence that happens in the film, especially that part with the two samurais, she's the one that's like, I love that. I think it was, and you can't think of anything more horrifying that can happen to a person, and I like to be part of that. So it's interesting how the actor who's going to be in that position and taking on, like, going to be made, seeing is going to be made infamous in the law, in horror law. She's the one who's like, oh fuck yeah, let's do it, guys. We don't
And
have
you
to
know
worry
whose
about
idea
me.
it was? That was Rutger Hauer's idea.
Mm.
That was not in the script. Rutger came up with the two semi idea.
He's an interesting dude in that, and I'll get into during production now. He does a lot of improvisations he actually brought to so you talked about the coins. He improvised
Mm-hmm.
that on the day.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so he did it, and a lot of times because the director was very green, so Rutger Hauer come up with ideas, and you go, yeah, Rutger, whatever you want to do, you go ahead, you're the man. Because suppose like C. Thomas Howell said that the guy was like incredibly intense, throughout the movie.
He said it made
Um,
him nervous
yeah,
between takes. He
and
was so intense.
there was a moment where C. Thomas Howell's like, screw this, I'm gonna, go up and let's have some lunch together. So he knocks on his door. He comes in, he's like we in his trailer, and they're having lunch, and they're just dead silence, no conversation whatsoever. And they're just chain smoking Camel cigarettes, and the whole thing's filled with smoke. Kind of looks like a Tony Scott scene, no doubt. And after like a while, um, C. Thomas Howard kind of like, tries to break the silence, and he says, Rucker, what's your secret to playing bad guys? And Rucker takes a long drag of his cigarette. He looks at the guy with those, pale blue eyes. He exhales, and then he whispers, I don't play bad guys. And then C. Thomas Howard gets up, walks out the trailer, and that was their whole conversation. The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere. And that was the kind of thing that about Rutger Hauer, like he always says that, even all the way back to Blade Runner days. He goes, I don't play bad guys. These are people, that have their own kind of things going on. You don't know what it is, but I know what it is. That's kind of like a big thing for him throughout the movie. So it was really kind of interesting how he kind of does stuff like that, like all the different improvisations. Even adding, I don't know if you noticed that scene we talked about in the diner as well, where he gives him the handkerchief with the six bullets. You notice that there's a rock in there as well. There's a
Yes.
Rutger put the rock in there. No one knew there was going to be a rock in there. So that was him again doing that. So there were things that he brought that weren't in the script that were really unexpected gifts. But there was one moment in the film. It's not in the film, but one moment of improvisation that didn't work. So it's a scene where they're at the hotel and Nash is on the bed, and then Rutger Hauer's kind of next to her, like the kidnapping scene. So originally Rutger Hauer's like, I want to read to her my poetry. Um, and so the director's like, yeah, sure, whatever you want to do. And so Rutger's reading this poetry to her. And then they do the take, and Rutger actually comes up to the director and goes, that wasn't good, wasn't it? And he's like, no, it wasn't. He goes, okay, we'll leave it out. And so thankfully, Rutger kind of had the wherewithal of, like, to know he's
He can self
he's
censor.
his poetry wasn't working, and like, which is funny because the director said that he would have left it in if Rucker said to leave it in, because he's just like, everyone's so intimidated by this guy, which I think is just absolutely fantastic. Um, so TriStar releases this movie in cinemas. I think it went to 800 theaters on February 21, 1986. So we're 2 days away from the anniversary of this movie. I think it'll be what 40 years since the movie came out. Made
Oh,
2.1 million during its opening weekend. It went on to gross 5.8 million in North America. But like we said, this is a movie that made its money through cable and VHS and such. Some of the reviews that came this way was brutal. Roger Ebert awarded it 0 stars.
Yeah, they
Gene
went on
Siskel, 0
Siskel and
stars.
Ebert.
Yeah.
Yeah, Siskel and Ebert were on Johnny Carson and said this movie's awful, it's terrible, and Johnny pushed back on him and said, "Well, hey, I thought you guys were anti-censorship." They're like, "No, no, no. This movie has every right to be made and be released in theaters, and no one should go see it."
Mm.
Wow. Wow, that's harsh. And the thing about it is, like, I couldn't disagree more. I mean, I found it so intense. Like most movies you watch, especially like the ones you rented on VHS or saw on TV like that, most of the movies would just leave your memory after
Mm.
watching it. But it's a movie like this, and another one that reminds me from a similar era from like the year before in '85 was Buckaroo Banzai.
Mm-hmm.
You just,
Peter
it
Weller,
sticks in your brain. Doesn't make it a good movie, but you remember it intensely. You remember everything about it, and that says something because most movies are forgettable. So even if it's not a good film, the fact that you remember it really sticks with you. And The Hitcher is one of those where it's like, man, I had trouble going to sleep that night having
yeah.
nightmares.
Yeah.
Because I was still pretty young at that point, like 13, 14. No. Yeah, I was 13 years old when that movie came out. That's intense.
So later on, this movie becomes like a cult classic. And a lot of directors talk about how much they love it. So in 2001, Nolan added this movie among his guilty pleasure movies to a website called Film Comment. He said that as a teenager, I never questioned the logic of this 80s chiller, but now it seems mind-bendingly arbitrary plot-wise. It does feature the criminally underappreciated Rutger Hauer in his finest and most influential Euro psycho performance outside of Blade Runner. And of course, Nolan cast Rutger Hauer in Batman Begins. And then you have Steven Soderbergh during a audio commentary for a film he produced called The Day Trippers. He said that the script itself is one of the best scripts he ever read because he cited the script as a prime example that allows actors to easily visualize the final film in their head because of the writing from Eric Red, which I think is really high praise for it. One person who was critical of the film though, Rutger Hauer. So during his biography, actually no, actually during a 1986 article. So this is the year that the film came out with a place called Performance. It was a newspaper. Susan Lambert was the author. He said there are a couple moments in the film that I don't particularly like because they're so disgusting. There are moments that are really tough to take. They were tough for me to take because I knew I was going to lose part of my audience, which I find really interesting because if people talk about Rutger Hauer's films, Hitcher is always up there as one of his kind of best performances. So I kind of find it really interesting how he's saying that he thinks that um, the whole thing was just too much for he thinks for his fans to handle. But I think he was more thinking about more the um, screenplay than the movie, I think, because he does talk about the
Yes.
eyeball and the hamburger, which is something, quite quite pretty full on for a cinematic scene. If I, so he says, the finger, okay, no worries, but the eyeball, no. So I think he might be talking more about the script and the movie itself, because like we said, the movie itself, even though it is very horrifying in its surreal aspects and a lot of things and the intensity and
A lot of
everything,
it's implied.
a lot of
It's
it's implied.
implied more than shown.
Yeah, even the tearing apart scene. I'm sure I haven't seen it. You haven't seen it. The remake. I'm sure they show all this stuff because it came out in 2007. That's when it was kind of like all these horror movies are going through the torture porn kind of thing, and they were showing you
Yep.
everything, which is probably why the sequel never worked. But yeah, I think it's really interesting. He talked that way in regards to a movie, especially when the movie's coming out. You want to pump it up a bit, right? You don't want to go to go down the Siskel and Ebert line of things, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. I think that later on he recognized that the movie was revered in a way much
Right.
later. It's funny, I didn't even catch that in Batman Begins that Christopher Nolan hired Rutger. I forgot. I recently went through the Dark Knight trilogy.
Mm.
Uh, and what shocked me most about it was not, there was something I caught this time through that I'd never caught before, which is Christopher Nolan has been desperate his entire career because even though he's American, he went to British boarding school.
Right.
He has wanted to direct James Bond.
Right.
More than anything, he wanted to do James Bond. And when I watched these Batman movies now with that, for some reason that kept cropping in my mind. I was like, this has a lot of James Bond elements, including
Right.
that he has his own version of Q. The international aspect, the way they push that is like, I think Christopher Nolan's making more of a James Bond than a Batman movie in a way.
Right.
I just found it more interesting that I never caught that before, that it's like, these have a lot of James Bond to them. The layers, a lot of the sets, especially in the Dark Knight Rises, very James Bond style set design, the 1960s and 70s James Bond. Like the style of the rooms and the design followed much more of that early James Bond. I forget who the production designer was. He's absolutely one of the greatest. He even did Dr. No. He did all the original Connerys. I can't remember the guy's name. I have to look it up. I apologize. I'm
I'll
gonna
look it up
look
here
up.
as well.
I'm gonna look up who was the production designer. Fine.
Ken
Give me the
Adam.
other one. Ken Adams. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ken Adams kind of redefined the genre of production designer on those Bond movies, including Dr. No. When you get to that big Dr. No nuclear facility thing, it was like, and everything he did after that, especially Goldfinger
Mm-hmm.
and You Only Live Twice, those sets that he designed, the look and feel, just the spatial relation, how the camera looked at these large sets. That's something that Nolan really clearly does an homage to. I'd never caught that before.
I'm going to end this discussion on The Hitcher by counting down my top five road trip movies from hell. Um, sorry, road trips from hell movies. So I'm going to go down this list, and you let me know what you think at the end of it, if you
Okay.
put anything else in there. All right, so at number five, Breaking Down, the 1996 Kurt Russell movie. Wife gets
Yep.
kidnapped by truckers in the movie. Incredibly underrated movie, that one. Number four, National Lampoon's Vacation. Big road trip from hell. Just wants a family man, just wants to go to Wally World. Throughout it all, they have to go through many obstacles. It feels like this middle class working man's own version of purgatory is going through many different things here, and to get to Wally World in the end. Number three, I'm going to put The Hitcher, which we just talked about here. Number two, I'm going to put Duel. A lot of comparisons with Hitcher and Duel, for especially the critics. I think it was Siskel who said that the Hitcher is like a pale kind of like rip-off of Duel in his review there. Number one, I'm going to put Sorcerer, 1977, William Friedkin. So you got
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of kind of like gangsters and criminals living in Chile. The only way they can get back to where their home countries is by driving two trucks full of like fragile sticks of boxes of dynamite through the Rocky Mountains of Chile. They're going over bridges that are collapsing, all sorts of stuff. It's an incredible movie. If no one's ever seen it, you got to watch The Sorcerer. It's actually fantastic. Came out the same year as Star Wars, by the way. You mentioned Star Wars before,
Oh yeah.
77. So those are my top five road trips from hell movies.
I would exchange. I love Duel, and I do see some similarities, mostly in that there's an unknown motivation. Why is this guy trying to kill this other guy?
Yeah.
And the motivation never being explained, not being motivated by anything we saw on screen. You know what I mean? So that's where that comparison is strongest, and of course, being American Southwest. But I would put for mine, I would have had for sure Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Oh, geez, yes.
Planes,
Yes.
Trains, and Automobiles definitely qualifies on there. And in a way, it was remade as Deadpool and Wolverine. So, but that was not so much a road movie, but they definitely took heavy inspiration from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. But my number one, Midnight Run.
Oh, yes. De Niro. Yes, I'm
Midnight Run would
impressed.
be my number one by far, by a long shot. Just because Midnight Run, another one of these classic 80s movies that just doesn't get mentioned enough.
Mm.
And the thing is with that movie, Charles Grodin's part was supposed to be played by Robin Williams.
All right.
And that would have ruined it. Charles Grodin's performance and just this annoying accountant character, Robin Williams would have been too much Robin Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Robert De Niro, who's such a serious, straight actor, him getting annoyed with Charles Grodin seemed genuine and not acting. Even though it was acting, they got along great. But
Right.
just his character, this grizzled, divorced dad that's working as a bounty hunter, really seemed genuinely annoyed, and it was just one of the greatest performances they ever did. And he had Dennis Farina as a mobster that just, wow. There's a tiny scene towards the end in an airport where there's just this tiny moment. He's trying to make Robert De Niro break. He's like, hey, did you hear about the guy, the other police guy that's banging your wife? Heard he got a promotion. Imagine that. The guy bangs another cop's wife, gets a promotion. What do you think about that? It's just needling him, pushing hard. I mean, it's amazing. Like, that moment, like those are actors that were given everything. And again, like road trip movie, that one had, again, planes, trains, and auto. They started on planes, trains, cars,
Yes.
everything they can. And it
Yes.
just was the road trip from hell. Road movie from hell. Midnight Run is one of the best.
Speaking of actors trying to break De Niro on set, you ever heard about the stories of Don Rickles breaking De Niro on the
Yes,
set of
on
Casino?
Casino.
Yeah.
He
He's
did.
like,
He broke
yeah.
him every time.
He's like, so
De
that's how you're gonna do
Niro,
it? That's how you're gonna do
he
it, huh?
was having,
Yeah, you're the best actor in the world. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
he goes, what are you mumbling for? Talk normal. And he'll say things to Marty. He goes, Marty, I can't work with this guy. He's not giving me anything. I'm getting nothing to work with here, Marty. And they're dying. They're both dying, laughing at Don.
True.
The outtakes we've seen on like really poor VHS dailies have me in tears laughing at what Don Rickles is saying to all of them.
Do you think Don Rickles would have been able to break Rutger Hauer on the Hitcher?
No.
Nope.
I think Rutger Hauer is so in his headspace, I don't think anybody could have found him as a person. C. Thomas Howell tried at dinner, as you said,
He
and he
did.
didn't get through. So
No,
I don't
sir.
think Don Rickles would have got a laugh out of him. I think he would have made everybody else laugh, and I think he would have then been terrified of Rutger Hauer.
Yeah. So The Hitcher, 1986, one of the great underrated horror thrillers. It's a couple of days, going to have the 40th anniversary, and this podcast will be up around then. And Peter John Ross, I got to say, look, thank you so very much for talking all things Hitcher with me and Rutger Hauer and this just fantastically underappreciated movie that's now, now does get its flowers like quite a bit, which is really cool. And for everyone out there listening, I'm going to have links for everything Peter John Ross in the show notes for the website, the Facebook page, links to where you can watch his movies as well. I really recommend everyone check out Social Media Monster. It's a fantastic documentary. It came out back in 2022, 2023. It's a fantastic movie, and I don't want to give away too much about what it's about, but man, you got to watch it and you'll love it because it deals with its own psychopath in that movie. So maybe Rucker Howell could have played him in a past life, who knows? But yeah, thank you so much, Peter John Ross, and thank you again for joining me today.
No problem. Thanks.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.